All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's statement of compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. This show is a series that has been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's program is pre-recorded and is called Where We Left Off. Thanks to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, Project Director, to Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and to Crochet Starnes, Audio and Prompter. Last week, we discussed water. At some point, we're all going to be on the same page in reality. My doctor, Charles Gant, is on the verge of publishing a medical textbook about the fact that we are transcendent beings. The hippocampus has a special role. Humanity possesses many hidden abilities. According to my source on the hippocampus, we are transcendent beings. In other words, we have many talents and capabilities that are going to stand us in good stead during the global currency reset. As you think, if you act, and there is no contradiction between those aspects of consciousness within, this is sovereignty. This is why we're ready for a new phase. The next step is for the people who understand what's really going on in the world, and I will discuss how we're going to end the corruption in the world's money system. Enough people, that is, a critical mass of people, understand what I'm talking about so that we can take these next steps. We've been fighting this corruption for a long time. Don't be confused by my low profile, whether I'm representing you and everybody else. We're all in this together. One of the things that I need to do now is to remind people about how important it is that I make sure that I don't get out ahead of everybody. This step is vital, and it's one of the reasons I may appear to people that our progress is slow. As we all gain confidence, things are going to move faster. I give proof for everything I tell you and answer your questions. The proof is in the archives to this series. In June, YouTube tried to delete my channel, including the DCTV series on the banking cartel, together with my other videos. Because I'm dancing the tango with all of humanity, including the world's military powers, the cabal had to restore all of the videos in my YouTube channel within 6 hours. The net effect was to alert an ever-widening audience about the corruption in the world's money and the global currency reset. It takes time for people to understand how we're all in this together. The YouTube crisis illustrated the way we're working together in the global currency reset. And David Keesing said, "That just goes to show you were speaking the truth and awakening the world to evil banking cartels." More people realize the important role for gold and silver and the need to move to local currencies. We're taking back our world by using the common law. Remaining active is key. Let me add that we're in the middle of an historic transition. One of the unknown but very positive factors is the fact that we are transcendent beings. I understand that many of us are trapped in a state of being that doesn't allow us to realize that potential. We're going to learn and teach each other. As you all must appreciate by now, I'm also learning on the job, and I'm learning from you. And as Larry wrote in the Twitter where we left off, the powers that were are mounting well-coordinated attacks. I'm going to describe what we're doing to fight these attacks. The Overseer Mandate Trustee must act transparently so that we remain strong in our joint defense. There are always direct attacks on me as an individual human being. I seem to have a sixth sense in avoiding car accidents. I stop before going into intersections where the cabal's drivers run red lights. Once I hit the brakes hard while on the beltway, even though there were no brake lights yet on the cars ahead of me. Recently, one of the healers protecting me had to shield me, and they wrote, "Hi Karen, I just worked on you, and I did see a very black energy coming out of your solar plexus chakra. Then I shielded you. I'll do that for 3 days for it to hold. It should be better every day for 3 days." You can see from last month's comment pages on YouTube how people responded to last month's kidnapping. And in a tweet from Fake to Real, the comments section of DCTV's July 30 episode, the members of my family are a pretty good cross-section as far as their susceptibility to scalar weaponry. Because of this, my family has endangered me, despite all the best intentions in the world. I'm trying to put my responsibility as Overseer Mandate Trustee ahead of my responsibilities as a mother, daughter, sister, and cousin. The cabal loves to play divide and conquer with my family. I'll give you an example. My family sought a court order to have me arrested and put in handcuffs because they thought I was a danger to myself when my doctor didn't use antibiotics but used silver instead. By the way, the slew of antibiotics that the hospital used didn't help. Then doctors at Suburban and MedStar didn't accept my doctor's certification that I was not suicidal or homicidal. I finally was released after establishing a working relationship with an individual in one of the powerful secret societies who was at MedStar when I was there and who lobbied for my release. The cabal is threatening to use mind control on susceptible members of my family to seek to have me arrested again. I'm going to have to leave my residence until my family learns that I will not be helped this way. In the meantime, the global currency reset continues, and there's evidence of progress, and one of the pieces of evidence is a tweet from Emmanuel Omar, who asked me, "Are you black or white? Not that it matters or anything, but it would really be nice if you were black. You're kind of cute. How did you get to be so smart?" And then I took a couple of days to respond, and I said that his question went to the heart of the matter. The Moors had a very important role in the United States. There's only one race, and that's the human race. And you can see there were a lot of people that agreed with me, and then they took the counters down. And Tiernan Owl Ryan wrote, when I had called out Gerald Celente, he wrote, "All will be revealed. Doubt that not for a moment." And now it's time for me to talk extemporaneously. Well, I just wanted to reemphasize how happy I am to be back on DCTV. And I feel that we are, in some very real sense, a family. There are people who are really, one person, for example, was saying that every day they were spending a lot of time on the social media looking to see our progress. And I can tell you there is very real progress. I was going back before I wrote this teleprompter. I was going back and looking at what I had written 4 years ago, where I don't know if you remember where we had the video about the little sailboat that was coming about. I don't know if you've ever gone sailing, but we have actually come about. That's a way of turning. And if you sail, then you know how the wind works to propel your boat forward, and how you have a role to push the tiller. And then you have to get enough momentum so that when you push the tiller, the boat is turning. And sailing is a wonderful thing to do. But I remember when we were all watching that, how people were responding, how people were looking at the various YouTube series. And then when I was, I forgot to take some water, so of course I'm going to cough. And you should realize that a lot of what happens to me, especially on air, is scalar weaponry. There's not a single thing that I say or do that I'm not fighting scalar weaponry, especially when I'm on DCTV talking extemporaneously like I am. So I've learned how to resist. I've learned how to think on my feet. It's been a growing experience, and I think many of us are they're growing along with each other, because we are all working our way free. And I don't know what the next step is going to bring, but I do know when I'm working on the teleprompters, it's not that I'm taking dictation at all, but I do feel that that there's a common ground that's part of our dialogue. And I think other people are expressing the very same thing. I know that when I was in prison, and the voice to the outside was Betsy Malone, and there was another person, Katie, who was doing a lot of wonderful work. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how I was going to get out. So just letting things develop, having the patience to see what the next step is. And what actually happened was that we grew by leaps and bounds, because this coalition that we're talking about, the Coalition for the Rule of Law, that's what I'm calling it, but I'm just naming it that to call it something. It's all of us working together. And that entity has a life of its own. And I don't know if you recall, but when I was writing the teleprompter just before I was kidnapped, there were things that were I couldn't understand what was going on. There was a slideshow of my old tweets that showed itself to me. I didn't know that was going to happen. There are so many unexpected things that take place. I do feel that there's a spirit of humanity. That's what, when we were talking about the tweet last week, when we were saying there's no one race, it's the human race. And people really, they related to that. Well, we're relating to each other, and I'm not indispensable, but I've passed the baton, but I'm also there actively involved. It's such a gratifying experience, and when I thought that I might end up in jail forever, and it was just going to be up to everyone else to carry on. I was just very unhappy because I did want to continue the role. I felt that this was an important role, and we're all working to define what that role is. And I guess it's lucky that I'm very extroverted, and I will just talk about anything, because it's very important for people to know what it is that I'm doing and saying on behalf of everyone else. And this is also because you have to hold me accountable. If I say something that doesn't make sense, that people can't subscribe to, then I have got to be taking direction. When I say we're dancing the tango together, if you've ever danced the tango, you know that you can't lead. If you try to lead, you're going to trip over your partner's feet. You just have to somehow get into the groove. You have to keep your footwork going, and you just have to be propelled. And that's really how I feel my job as overseer mandate trustee is. And that is that I'm dancing with all of humanity, and it's quite an experience. And when I thought I wasn't going to be doing that because I was in jail, I was very sad that that had come to an end, because I really do. I enjoy it. And I can tell you how I experience it, because it's really it's an evolving role as we all understand more and more, as the puzzle pieces come together. Then I don't have to do as much, because there are so many other people that are explaining things for all of us. But we also have to be respectful of each other. And the very worst thing that you can do is to get out ahead of people, so that people have got to call you back and make sure that we're all in this together. That's the only way that it will work. And that's also the only way that humanity can take possession of its wealth. Because if we don't recognize that it's all our wealth, and that was also what I was talking about when I was talking about water. You realize that water is not something that's going to be divided, and that does belong to everyone. And that when the banking cartel thinks they're going to be making money on water, we're not going to accept that, are we? No. So we have to learn how to cooperate, and also how to take possession of our wealth. And before we take possession of the actual wealth, we have to be able to rely on ourselves to know that it's not going to go missing. It would be really a very sad thing if, when the world's monetary gold reserves were used for money, and that money was then hoarded and wasn't used to clean up the corruption. That would be very sad. We would have missed an important opportunity. And so I think one of the reasons that it's taking a while before we actually do convert the currencies. It's because we know that this is a one-time opportunity, and we don't want to mess up. And so I do think that we're getting increasingly close, but I don't know all of the next steps because it's something it's very, if you think about the scale of what we're undertaking. First of all, there's no turning back because enough of us know how the world's money works and how corrupt it is. And people do not want to be paying interest to the bankers when the wealth of the world is not with the bankers. There's no reason for it. So that's not going to continue, but it does have to be wound down in a very systematic way, so that it doesn't. The corruption is reduced and not increased. So one of the questions that came up was, are we going to have gold-backed food stamps? And the reason that we're not going to do that is if you have a big bureaucracy that has to be administered, you know that's going to lead to corruption, because that's the way corruption works. We have to get things done in a way that it's very simple, it's very clear-cut, and it gives a very big role to the people themselves, and not a big role to any bureaucracy whatsoever. So, but we then have to think to ourselves, if there are people who are now surviving because they have food stamps, how are we going to wind down the existing system so that people aren't harmed, and we do end up with the support, but it's not via a big bureaucracy. And you can figure out that communities are going to play a very big role. But all of these issues they're up in the air. They're for us to define. And there are many, many questions. One of the questions is if the way that we approach the global currency reset, if the rules have to be equivalent in the various countries. And there are good reasons why you might want to have things varied. There may be some special cultures or reasons why people would want to approach it a different way. But when you have national differences that are very large, people are going to move. And there may be countries that become very crowded because their system is friendlier than another country's system. But I do think that we're going to have to divide ourselves into nations, the existing nations, for the interim, until we decide to do it differently in the future, in another way. And when we say we decide, if we have to wait a very long time to decide things, then it's going to become very cumbersome. There's a good way to poll people, and that's using the power transition model, which is a very close approximation of what people would want. And you can always go back and tally votes or do some other thing to make sure that the power transition model is actually reflecting what people really want themselves. These are some of the musings that I have. I'd actually wanted to tell you about the things that I learned in prison, because it was a wonderful opportunity. I was joking to some of my friends. It's very hard for an old dog to learn new tricks, and being incarcerated forced me to do things that I never would have otherwise done. One of those things was to learn to be patient, to learn to be on another time, and also to learn that that people's views and ways of thinking, that it's much better to be not judgmental, because if you're living with a group of people in close quarters like that, day after day, and you're judging them, then your own experience becomes very narrow. It becomes you're becoming you're pushing people away, as opposed to embracing them. And when you tolerate people, you give them the opportunity to surprise you in ways that are unexpected and that are really quite nice. So I felt that I was growing a lot by the forced incarceration. It wasn't something that I would have chosen to do, but once I was in it and I had no choice, it was a definite growing experience. One of the very strong things, though, that I experienced very recently was just how important music is, because I couldn't play the cello, which I like to do. There was no way to get my cello there and to play it. And so when I finally did pick up the cello again and play, it was very special, because there was there was a quality of when you have something that you like to do and you're doing it after a long time. It's just it's very enjoyable. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. 4 years ago, we said that our coalition had set a new course, and we showed a video of a small sailboat that had come about. Meanwhile, we're continuing on our new course. I'll close with the outro from that 4-year-old segment. We have discussed how people are uncovering the corruption at the center of the world's currencies. They're not going to pay interest on country debt to the world's central banks, when in truth, it's these banks that have been secretly hiding the people's gold.